Hello folks, Quantum Bigfoot Part 2. And we're only on page 5, right? Oh, goodness sakes. I don't want my long flowy hair to get burned with the candle. Okay. There's a large group of people who think they must be remnants, the Bigfoots must be remnants of the Gigantopithecus. Gigantopithecus. A giant ape-like creature who supposedly went extinct 100,000 or more years ago. Okay, they were discovered in 1935 by anthropologist Ralph von Kogswald, who found fossilized molars of a genus of giant prehistoric ape in a Hong Kong apothecary shop. Awesome. After a lot of head scratching and hypothesizing, this amazing creature came to be called Gigantopithecus. The few scientists who are looking for an answer to the giant enigma usually turn to the Gigantopithecus. We're just going to call it the, This is because more fossils remain of this have been found since Cogswald's discovery. With over 1,300 teeth, mandibles, and fossilized bones from 3 established species of the giant ape, scientists have something they can analyze. Unfortunately, suitable remains have not been discovered to get reliable DNA. From the remains found, we know a male adult Gigantopithecus was probably between 10 and 12 feet tall. However, we don't know if they walked upright or if they walked on all fours like existing apes. If gigans, we'll just call them, if gigans evolved like evolutionists say humans evolved, there would be no more of a spiritual significance in them than in any other wild animal. You know, I know people channel Bigfoot. I've never really talked to Bigfoot, but if you have seen me do videos here, I've never experienced what I'm experiencing now. The candles were jumping all around. I heard weird noises from the candles, and now I have this pressure in my ear, and I feel like there's an energy here, and I don't feel like it's negative, but it's definitely different. So, okay, if gigans evolve, like evolutionists say, there would be no more of a spiritual significance in them than any other wild animal. All wild animals have a spiritual significance. Okay, furthermore, if Bigfoot is somehow a remnant of the Gigantopithecus, okay, of the big G, he may only be a giant ape who has learned how to live undetected in the woods. Yeah, right. With no unusual attributes at all. No. However, logically, I must ask, with all the people looking for the being and all the technology available, how does something so big remain so hidden for so long? Quantum going in and out of realms. Yeah. Maybe a hybrid. Stuart Fleischmann, assistant professor of comparative genomics at the Swiss University in Cairo, and his team have published the results of a 7-year study mapping the genomes of 9 ancient Egyptian pharaohs. If proven correct, their findings could potentially change the world's history books forever. And figuring quantum reality and parallel shifts, such as the Mandela effect shows, this could changing all the time. Okay, so, and our understanding of our place in the universe. Yeah, we used to be on the Sagittarius arm, we've moved to the Orion arm. Yeah. Now this is where it gets very interesting indeed. It appears this increased activity in Akhenaten's genome would suggest he had a higher cranial capacity because of the need to house a far larger cortex. But some ask, wouldn't a mutation have caused a human brain to grow like this? Well, as of now, we have yet to discover such an intriguing technique, which is despite many years of breakthroughs in a genetic science. Could it possibly be that this over 3,300-year-old evidence points towards ancient genetic manipulation on a human subject? Is it potentially the work of advanced extraterrestrial beings? They said source, UFO International. So UFOinternationalproject.com. Okay, separated by an ocean. Separated by the Atlantic Ocean, Akhenten's, which is spelled Akhenaten for your research, skull, and the skulls we examined in Peru and Bolivia seem to have a common cranial elongation. In addition, according to Dr. Aaron Judkins, biblical archaeologist, the elongated South American skull were lacking a sagittal suture, and after weighing them we found they would have had more brain matter, weighing 25% to 30% more. Dr. Judkins also determined the Peru and Bolivian skulls were not completely human. Who knows where Bigfoot truly came from, but nowadays they are alive and seem to be doing very well. A huge bipedal ape-like being who roams the earth at will, stays hidden in the backwoods, and rarely interacts with humans. But this is where my theory separates from the tribe and begins to circle a different scientific wagon train. In the case of the Peruvian naturally elongated skull on the next page, many of these types of remains are displayed in Paracas, Peru, mostly in private museums. This example, as with many others, is not a form of cranial deformation. This hybrid skull has no sagittal suture, only one parietal bone, unlike human skulls, which have two. And remember, in the Mandela effect stuff, the skull's changed. My skull is totally changed. All right, so basically what this is it's the pharaoh, right? So the pharaohs have a hat. I mean, it looks like a hat. That's their skull. Long story short. Obviously, like many, I think there are much more than just an ape-like creature living in the woods. Based on my experience around them, they are definitely cognizant, and from a highly qualified cryptolinguist, primarily responsible for identifying foreign communications using signals, equipments. The recordings we made of these beings in the Sierra camp have a complex language. They reasoned not like a wild beast, but like a human with sapience, that is, a human who is wise and discerning. Does this mean that all sapient beings are human? A human being is part of the whole called by us universe, a part limited in time and space. He experiences his thoughts and feelings as separate from the rest, a kind of optical delusion of his own consciousness. This delusion is a prison for us, restricting us to our personal desires and to affection for a few persons nearest to us. Our task must be to free ourselves from this prison by widening our compassion to embrace all living creatures and the whole of nature in its beauty. Albert Einstein. If Einstein said we should be compassionate of all living creatures, does that mean that all Bigfoots deserve our compassion, good or bad? I think the family of these creatures that I've dealt with in the Sierra Nevada mountains was friendly. They trusted the environment of our remote camp. Yet they would be able to feel frequencies if they're higher consciousness beings, and they would know whether those people were going to harm them. Yet they never came out from behind huge trees and purposefully allowed themselves to be exposed. Only on occasions did any of us catch a glimpse. At first we thought their vocalizations were directed at us and obviously sounded very threatening. But in hindsight, those sounds may have been directed at one of their own. Someone else wanted the leftover food, or maybe getting too close to these little sockeyed hominoids inside that shelter. They only took food we left for them. They never took the deer we hunted, which was hung on a cable behind our shelter, although at times they did move those carcasses around a little. That's weird. Over the years, I've heard several accounts of these creatures being aggressive towards humans, sometimes throwing rocks. Humans probably deserved it. My opinion is that rock throwing was due to humans going into an area where the Bigfoot didn't want them to be. That seems reasonable, possibly protecting a young one. Or perhaps they wanted to hunt where the humans were. That really makes sense. We all have to eat. But maybe the best one is that they were having a bad hair day, or maybe during a nap one slept on a prickly pine cone. Who actually knows why they scare people off at times by throwing rocks? It's speculation. Yeah, because if they were violent, they would just, do something different. Okay. Why they interacted so much with us at the Sierra camp is a question still being asked today. And the answer I used to give is that they were curious and loved our food. However, I now think there may have been a more complex reason, a spiritual reason, oh yes, definitely, for this to have happened. Speaking on behalf of the good Bigfoots, they want us to understand more about them, or better yet, more about how humanity is screwing things up, that they may be forbidden to actually intervene or interfere. If that is the case, just who or what could have forbidden them? Yeah, definitely a spiritual reason. I forgot what I was going to say. Okay, a case of inspecting, observing, and non-interference. Adapted from Chapter 6, Voices in the Wilderness. Bear ravaged the deer if we left them in the forest overnight. So often it was a challenge to beat the fading daylight. Sometimes Bill and I needed to make more than one trip to pick up all the deer. More than once when we arrived back in camp to get our horses, we found big 5-toed footprints around them. If our animals could only talk or operate a camera. After our return to camp, we'd hung the deer on a cable behind the shelter where later they would be skinned. Sometimes after a visit from our giant friends, the next morning we noticed a huge footprint under the deer. Figuring they were curious about the skinned deer, late one afternoon, Larry, Warren's son, and I smoothed out an area under the deer, hoping to obtain a really clear print. We then joined the others around the stove for the usual feast of fresh liver and heart. About an hour had passed when Larry and I took our flashlight to check the back side of the shelter again. The deer had been moved down the cable, and there were 3 big foot impressions on the ground. The shelter is about 8 foot high, and the stove is about 50 feet from where we hung the deer. Although I figure these creatures had been observing us all along, this real-time spy job really brought that awareness to the forefront of my mind. It was a bit unsettling. So, yeah. Where do we go from here? In this universe, there must be an innumerable amount of different advanced races of beings. Some good, some bad, some probably very ugly in our eyes anyway. Different ones have visited Earth and mingled with the different creatures here, including humans. Mingled? But after decades of research and contemplation, I believe some mingled for profound spiritual reasons. Yes. Oh, I was going to say earlier that people do channel Bigfoot. Like on YouTube, there's, like they're interdimensional beings or, but yeah, that's just what we call them. Science ascribes to evolution the doctrine of Charles Darwin. Darwin published his theory of evolution in 1859 on the origin of species. Darwinists would most likely pick the Gigantus theory. However, if you are an agnostic, a spiritual person, or maybe even semi-religious, this next chapter will surely pique your interest. Oh my. Chapter 2, a biblical perspective. Ancient ones, aliens, or hybrids, or all of the above. To get an idea of what the ancient texts say about giants, we should look at those texts and see if any could relate to our current day Bigfoot. Greek mythology and biblical accounts state that some demigods are a product of aliens copulating with humans. Oh my. Those hybrids, by their creator's clever manipulation of the DNA, were given advanced attributes. Those attributes could entail the ability to work within the quantum level of consciousness, just as humans, in my opinion, were originally designed to do. Because of my ongoing close-up experience with a family of Bigfoot, I'm often asked, what are they? Are they good or bad? My answer was, or is, that I don't know. The ones that I and my hunting buddies encountered in the high country of the Sierras Mountains of California didn't harm us. We were not devoured, nor had been We've been carried away in our sleeping bags to be used for meals, mating, manipulation, or who knows what. Over time, we actually thought they were becoming friendly. I've often wondered if they were trying to tell us something about themselves, or from a completely different side of the coin. They might have been actually bad, trying to gain our trust and then trick us into the dark side. Oh, goodness. That said, I've heard many reports of these creatures carrying on maliciously and antagonizing people. So, your frequency probably draws whatever version of them. So, like people, they can be nice or not nice, right? A deeper, more profound thought is that Bigfoot have different genomes, are a product of a different type of celestial being, and have a completely different agenda towards humanity. Although hybrids normally cannot procreate, a prime example of an exception today is the mule, the product of a female horse and a male donkey. It is extremely rare for mules to reproduce, but it does occasionally happen. Could these beings known as Bigfoot or Sasquatches be a hybrid who can successfully reproduce? Humans have not been shortchanged with any of the attributes that aliens may have passed on to their creations. According to Jesus, we can do everything he did and more. John 14:12. He knew and used the laws that God put into existence, in particular, the laws of quantum physics. So why are we not walking on water? Whatever these creatures are, they are not like us and have not been given the same rights that humans have on this earth. Ancient ones. For years I've heard of Bigfoots being referred to as the forest people, who want to protect the earth. They are also known as the ancient ones. These, from a biblical standpoint, would not necessarily have had their genome corrupted by the dark side, and are considered by many to be helpful to us as humans. They might consider them from the lineage of Cain, the firstborn son of sapient man, Adam, and a sapient woman, Eve. Cain turned out to be a very bad guy and killed his brother, Abel. He was marked by God, but still lived on, got married, had many children, and did malicious things on earth, as did his many warring descendants. There is a very conservative estimate of 7 million people on earth prior to the flood of Noah. Some have estimated there were more than this. It is not unreasonable to believe that one of Cain's offspring could have been the wife of Ham, one of Noah's sons, and a builder of the ark which housed Noah's family during the flood. This would mean that Cain's lineage, via Ham's wife, oh my goodness, made it through the flood, and their descendants were not the Nephilim, the hybrid demigod giants from celestial intervention into humans. In Genesis 4:23, prior to the flood, we find that Lamech, Cain's great-great-great-grandson, was an awesome intuitive hunter, but blind. He was best known for pursuing game blind, but with his son's help. During a hunting trip, Tubal Cain, his son, thought he had identified a wild animal for his father to shoot, but it was Cain, and Lamech inadvertently killed him. So this means Cain had the look of a wild animal, obviously a different than what they had, which also means that the mark of Cain was not... Okay, light flickering. You got a message for me? Mark of Cain was not a mutation of his DNA, or would have been passed on to his descendants. However, this story gives me pause. How could anyone tell a blind person where to shoot? Trying to direct him to a target. And why would you? My thought is that maybe some of the original attributes given to sapient man could still be understood and easily accessible. Intuitiveness, telepathy, a sixth sense. So through use of a sixth sense, perhaps Lamech sensed his targets. See more about this in chapter 12, the pineal gland. The mingling of the sons of Adam is reasonable, and would lend credibility to the notion that some Bigfoots may not be remnants of the Nephilim and the lineage of Cain, could have been aware of the attributes that mankind was originally given. However, for killing Cain, the curse that transcended to Lamech was 70 and 7-fold. What could this mean? Ham was one of Noah's 3 sons. Could whatever that curse was have been passed on through Ham's wife? Ham's descendants ended up inhabiting the land of Canaan, where the giant Goliath and his brother lived, but the Nephilim were also in that land. Numbers 13:33-34. The Bible doesn't refer to Goliath as a Nephilim, but he may have been. He was certainly a huge man, as were his 3 brothers. Considering giants were in Canaan hundreds of years after the flood, it's very believable that there was a lot of copulating and mixing it up happening there. My explanation of how the Nephilim, who were once destroyed by the flood, inhabited Canaan after the flood is simple. If entities from the cosmos with free will did it once in pre-flooded days, others could have done it again by commingling with the Canaanites, who were historically a warring people, thus creating giant hybrids in another attempt to corrupt the human genome. Many who think the Bigfoots want to be our friends and are not wicked could hold to the belief that the descendants of Cain were not the Nephilim. They were more human-like, with human attributes originally given to man. Thus they were the true ancient ones. However, they inhabited the land of Canaan, where a negative culture existed, but some of Cain's uncorrupted lineage may have fled prior to the Israelites overtaking that land. The Book of Enoch, yep, that's good stuff, discovered in Ethiopia in 1768, goes into great detail about the fallen ones, the celestial beings who went against God's will. In 1956, multiple copies of that book were found with the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the Book of Enoch, we find detailed accounts of giants and what was happening during these pre-flood days. The Book of Enoch is an audiobook. You can get it online for free. You can buy it, an audiobook on YouTube too. When the Israelites invaded Canaan, God gave instruction to kill all the people, men, women, children, even animals. Really? Even the children, one might ask? How could the God of love be so cruel? According to the Bible, it was because the land of Canaan was corrupt, had been penetrated by the dark side, trying desperately again to stop the Messiah, who had been prophesied to come from 100% pure human genome. Oh my goodness. An alien hybrid. But here's another biblical idea. Rebecca's womb. She had twins, one covered with red hair, Esau, E-S-A-U, and one normal, Jacob. In another shrewd and sneaky way, the dark side may have still been working the angles. Now the big question, can 2 eggs in a woman's uterus be fertilized by 2 different males at the same time? The answer is yes. 1 in 400 sets of fraternal human twins is biparental. Ooh. Advanced beings can manipulate through quantum rules the human makeup and may have fertilized one of the 2 eggs in Rebecca's womb, thus trying one more time in a completely different way to corrupt the human genome. All the birthrights would have been given to Esau, E-S-A-U, being the first out of the womb. The dark side was not giving up, just being more cunning. Through trickery, Rebecca instigated a method by which Jacob, instead of Esau, received the blessing from his father, and thus received all the birthrights, the right to inherit the father's estate. That lineage of Esau, her firstborn twin, became the father of the Edomites. Edom means red, who inhabited northern Canaan. Many mingled and spread into different cultures and races, and as many as 10,000 were slaughtered by Amaziah. 2 Chronicles 25:14. Edomites, E-D-O-M-I-T-E-S, today are considered a mindset instead of a race of people, very undesirable beings. It's been suggested that the cave pictures at the bottom of Michelangelo's paintings of the Last Judgment, page 29, is a depiction of hell, and inside that cave are 2 Edomites. Government involvement. But there is possibly another more disturbing type of DNA manipulation in primates. Yeah, not biblical at all. That is government intervention and experimentation. Prior to World War II, Russian dictator Stalin searched for ways to naturally produce super warriors. Adolf Hitler's henchmen also worked on the super warrior idea during the World War II. Some believes that our government picked up the Hitler wand and has carried it to a new level, possibly an out-of-control level. If there's anything to this theory, we should all be on our knees. Really, the United States government? Blah, blah, blah. Missing 411. Oh, that's what we were talking about earlier. Although David Paulides is not discussed at length in this book, I'd like to note he has written books about missing people, mostly in states and national parks. If you don't know about Missing 411, check it out on YouTube. It is fascinating. And the parks don't talk about it. Tons and tons of people disappear every year. I've been at meets with Mr. Paulite in his book series 411. They probably go into other dimensions. Gosh dang, my nose itches. Like with Bigfoots or whatever, they just, they don't find bones, they don't find nothing, they just disappear. So they obviously go into another dimension. David's background as a professional investigator has compelled him to give the facts and only the facts. It's not the facts, it's the facts. He writes about numerous people who went missing and the government doesn't know what happened, or they simply are not telling us. Anything else is a speculation. That said, we will probably never know if those missing people just wandered off a cliff or a bear ate them or if a giant took them or something else sinister. They probably were given rights to take them and test on them, like happened with Valiant Thor and Eisenhower. Most of them and or their remains have never been found. Native American lore speaks of this type of behavior regarding the Bigfoot Sasquatch as well. Alien? Question mark? The last theory is that they are coming from another place in the cosmos and enter Earth through portals. Yes. So there may really be a UFO connection. Yes. Several reports of UFOs are said to have also a Bigfoot connection. How do some of these ideas lend themselves to quantum physics? First, Noah was a spiritual man and knew the quantum attributes that were originally part of man's awareness. That knowledge was likely passed on to his descendants. Nimrod, Ham's grandson, who has been credited for attempting to build the Tower of Babel, Genesis 11:1, was a descendant of Cain, and he knew the unique power given to man. He was a hunter and a vicious warrior. If we take into consideration that men still knew that within them the quantum power to create could be solidified by their words, when the Tower of Babel would have been made sense to them. Speak of it, and it can happen. Genesis 11:6. The Bible says that their common language was broken up. Thus, all the collective energies of their words was taken away. In my opinion, some of these reclusive beings are a product of a cross between disobedient humans and aliens. The Nephilim, Genesis 1:26 and 27 states clearly how we were originally designed. And God said, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and let them have dominion over the fish in the sea, the fowl of the air, over the cattle in the earth, and over all creeping things that creepeth on the earth." The creepeth things. To sum this up, if Bigfoots are the Nephilim, they would most likely understand and operate in the quantum realm. If they are descendants of Cain, they could be the ancient ones and want to help mankind in hopes of having a place in the hereafter, still understanding and using the attributes that God's man originally had access to. If they are a derivative of our government messing around with super warrior ideas, we all could be in very, very big trouble. I'm so scared not. On the other hand, they are a product of evolution and just a very stealthy ape in the woods. Why haven't we been able to find one if that's the truth? Okay, well, let's just go ahead and end that there. We will begin again another day. I leave you in peace and in love. And whatever energy that is of the Bigfoots that is here, I love you. And I have the highest of intentions. And all those watching, God has blessed you, and I love you. I love you. Bye-bye.